Welcome to Defense Briefing. The content of the briefing includes: there's no other job, the colonial roots of Philippine poverty. UK property becoming more affordable at quickest pace in decades. Native News Online's top 10 photographs of 2023. Why 2023 was an uncomfortable year for the West. Russia's air assault on Ukraine draws criticism at UN Security Council meeting. There's no other job, the colonial roots of Philippine poverty. New York Times. The colonial legacy of Spain and the United States continues to shape the Philippines, where manufacturing makes up only 17% of the national economy, compared to 28% in China, according to World Bank data. While other countries in East and Southeast Asia have industrialized, the Philippines remains heavily reliant on agriculture, leaving tens of millions of landless Filipinos vulnerable to the wealthy families that control plantations. In addition, the U.S. did not engage in large-scale redistribution of land, leaving families which collaborated with colonial authorities in control of the soil and dominating the political sphere. The shortage of manufacturing and the distribution of land helps to explain why the country with the most fertile soils on Earth is plagued by hunger and poverty, with 1/5 of the population officially classified as poor. The Philippines also has a very small industrial base compared to other Asian economies, as the U.S. did not want to punish its ally economically after the war. Japan, for example, was forced to implement land reform after World War II. Meanwhile, the powerful families of the Philippines have lacked incentive to innovate, in contrast to surrounding economies where land redistribution has generated pressures for risk-taking and experimentation. The country's lack of manufacturing and lopsided distribution of land explains why nearly 2 million Filipinos work overseas, sending home much-needed remittances. The country's colonial past is also evident in the power of the wealthy Lorenzo family, which controls the plantation where Rodino Sawan works. Sawan was fired by the family and then rehired as a contractor, on 25% less pay. UK property becoming more affordable at quickest pace in decades. Yahoo! House prices may fall or stagnate in the UK next year, according to economists, leading to the longest stretch of improving affordability in more than 2 decades. Lower house prices would be good news for the younger generation and first-time buyers, who are increasingly concerned that high mortgage costs and prices have made home ownership a distant prospect. Meanwhile, the Conservative Party, which is preparing for a general election next year, would risk angering traditional Tory supporters who own property. House prices are expected to fall by between 0% and 2% in 2024, according to Bloomberg's survey of economists, with Oxford Economics being the most pessimistic, forecasting a 4% drop. Over the same period, wages are expected to rise by 7.1% on average, which will give consumers more purchasing power. This forecast will prevent a house price slump similar to the one in the early 1990s. Native News Online's top 10 photographs of 2023. Yahoo! Native News Online has selected 10 of its favorite photographs taken in 2023 to accompany its articles. The photographs capture the essence of Native American culture and the stories that matter to indigenous peoples. Among the featured photographs is one of Bunigran, the youngest person ever elected as president of the Navajo Nation, being inaugurated. Another image shows a totem pole being raised in Alaska to honor the victims of the Indian boarding school era. The photographs highlight important stories in Indian country and showcase the diverse culture and heritage of Native America. Why 2023 was an uncomfortable year for the West. BBC. The past year has seen a series of setbacks for major democracies, such as the US and Europe, on the international stage. One major setback has been the ongoing war in Ukraine, where Ukraine's army has been unable to push back Russian forces despite Western support. The Western support has been delayed due to concerns about provoking Russia, and by the time the support arrived, Russia had already built extensive defensive fortifications. Ukraine is now running short on ammunition and soldiers, and the West's attempts to impose sanctions on Russia have largely failed. Another setback for the West has been the war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. The war has diverted global attention away from Ukraine and has made the US and UK appear complicit in the destruction of Gaza by protecting Israel at the UN. This has led to an increase in Russia's influence in the Middle East. In addition, the war has spread to the southern Red Sea, where Iran-backed Houthis are launching attacks on ships, driving up commodity prices. Iran, despite being designated as a hostile threat by Western nations, has positioned itself as a champion of the Palestinian cause and has forged a closer alliance with Russia. The West has also faced setbacks in other regions. The countries of the Sahel region in West Africa have succumbed to military coups and have expelled European forces that were helping to combat a jihadist insurgency. The region is now being replaced by Russian mercenaries. South Africa, once seen as a Western ally, has been holding joint naval exercises with Russian and Chinese warships. North Korea, which is supposed to be under strict international sanctions, has forged close links with Russia and has test-fired intercontinental ballistic missiles. Finally, China has shown no sign of backing down on its territorial claims in the South China Sea and Taiwan. Despite these setbacks, there are some potential benefits for the West. The NATO alliance has rediscovered its defensive purpose in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. In addition, the recent war in Gaza has brought attention back to the issue of a future Palestinian state, which had largely been abandoned before. However, finding a solution to this problem will be difficult and will require compromises from both sides. Russia's air assault on Ukraine draws criticism at UN Security Council meeting. South China Morning Post. Russia faced criticism at the UN Security Council for launching missile and drone attacks against Ukraine. The strikes killed at least 30 civilians and wounded over 160 others, marking the biggest aerial attacks since the war began in February 2022. Poland claimed that a Russian missile had flown into its airspace. Most members of the Security Council condemned the attacks, with the US, France, and Britain all expressing their disapproval. China called for a political solution to the conflict. Russia's ambassador to the UN claimed that the attacks targeted military infrastructure and blamed Ukraine's air defense systems for civilian casualties. The UK's ambassador dismissed this as lies and disinformation. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres condemned the attacks and called for an immediate end to the violence. A conference collapses, a coach parts ways, and 8 more compelling youth stories from 2023. Yahoo! The University of Utah experienced a year of significant events in its athletic department. One of the most notable stories was the collapse of the Pac-12 conference, leading Utah to move to the Big 12. The gymnastics program also parted ways with its longtime head coach due to an external investigation into his behavior, and the football team was plagued by injuries, resulting in an 8-5 season. However, there were also many successes, such as the ski team winning its 4th straight national championship and several teams winning conference championships. The collapse of the Pac-12 conference was one of the biggest stories of the year for Utah sports. USC and UCLA left the conference, leaving it teetering on the edge. The conference tried to secure a television deal, but the Big 12 beat them to it with a nearly $2.3 billion media deal. As a result, Utah, along with Arizona, Arizona State, and Colorado, moved to the Big 12. The collapse of the Pac-12 effectively killed off the century-old conference, leaving just 4 power conferences. The gymnastics program also made headlines when it parted ways with its longtime head coach following an external investigation into his behavior. The investigation found that while the coach did not engage in any severe abuse or harassment, his coaching methods left some gymnasts feeling increased fear and pressure. The athletic director placed the coach on administrative leave due to conduct and actions that did not align with the university's values. Utah hired a new head coach in December, and the team has high expectations for the upcoming season. In addition to these stories, the football team was plagued by injuries, resulting in a disappointing 8-5 season. Key players, including the starting quarterback, suffered season-ending injuries, leading to multiple quarterback switches throughout the season. Despite the challenges, the team still had a successful season and ended on a high note with a victory over USC. The team's starting quarterback announced his return for the 2024 season, providing a boost for the team as they enter the Big 12. Afghan refugee in Oregon training flight crash that killed 3 ignored instructors' advice, NTSB says. Associated Press. A former Afghan Air Force pilot, Mohammad Hussein Musawi, and 2 other former Afghan pilots died in a plane crash in Oregon on December 16, 2022. The National Transportation Safety Board's preliminary report states that the crash occurred after Musawi ignored his flight instructor's advice not to return to a small airport due to low visibility caused by fog. The report also states that there were no mechanical malfunctions or failures with the plane. All 3 men killed in the crash had resettled in Oregon last spring after fighting with the American military. U.S. skips congressional review to approve sale of artillery projectiles to Israel. South China Morning Post. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has approved the sale of artillery shells and related equipment to Israel without congressional review. The Pentagon stated that Blinken determined an emergency exists that requires the immediate sale to Israel, thus waiving the requirement for congressional review. The sale comes as Israel increases its offensive in Gaza. The U.S. has urged Israel to minimize civilian casualties and scale down the war in the coming weeks. This is the second time this month that the Biden administration has bypassed congressional review for a weapons sale to Israel. South Africa accuses Israel of genocide in a UN court. New York Times. South Africa has accused Israel of genocide in the International Court of Justice, ICJ, and has called for a halt to the fighting in Gaza. South Africa has been critical of Israel's war against Hamas, and in November recalled all its diplomats from Israel over its treatment of Palestinian civilians. Israel's foreign ministry dismissed the claim as lacking factual and legal basis, and described the move as contemptuous. The ICJ is tasked with settling legal disputes between member nations. The 2023 All-Aegis football team, survival of the fittest mentality leads Julian Horton to Player of the Year honors. Yahoo! Aegis 2023 Football Player of the Year Julian Horton has his dad, mixed martial artist and lifelong boxer Jay Horton, for his fearless approach to the game. You always got to have no fear on the field. Whether it's coming down and making tackles or going up and getting a 50-50 ball, you got to want it more than the other person. That's why I got the tattoo. You're either gonna go get the ball or you're not, Julian said. Horton, who plays safety and receiver for Bel Air, transferred to the team after being counted out by Calvert Hall in Towson. Ladies and gentlemen, I am your 6 doctor, bringing you the latest news and insights from the 6 degrees world. Today, we have a mix of stories that highlight the ongoing effects of colonialism, global conflicts, and the triumphs and challenges in the world of sports. First, we delve into the colonial roots of poverty in the Philippines. The country's heavy reliance on agriculture and the lopsided distribution of land can be traced back to its colonial past. The lack of manufacturing and large-scale land redistribution has left millions of landless Filipinos vulnerable to the control of wealthy families. It's a complex issue that continues to plague the country, despite its fertile soils. It's a reminder that the legacy of colonialism can have long-lasting effects on a nation's economy and social structure. Shifting gears, we turn to the UK, where property is becoming more affordable at the quickest pace in decades. Lower house prices would be a relief for younger generations and first-time buyers who have been struggling to enter the housing market. However, it's a delicate balance for the Conservative Party, as they risk angering their traditional supporters who own property. It will be interesting to see how this plays out, especially with a general election on the horizon. On a lighter note, Native News Online has curated their top 10 photographs of 2023, showcasing the diverse culture and heritage of Native American communities. These photographs capture important stories and moments that matter to Indigenous peoples. It's a beautiful reminder of the richness and diversity of cultures within Native America. Turning our attention to global politics, 2023 was an uncomfortable year for the West. Major democracies, such as the US and Europe, experienced setbacks on the international stage. The ongoing war in Ukraine highlighted the West's challenges in effectively supporting Ukraine against Russian aggression. The conflict in Gaza also diverted global attention and allowed Russia to increase its influence in the Middle East. Additionally, the West faced setbacks in other regions, such as the Sahel and South China Sea. However, there are some potential benefits, such as the NATO alliance rediscovering its defensive purpose and renewed attention on the issue of a future Palestinian state. In a concerning development, Russia faced criticism at the UN Security Council for launching missile and drone attacks against Ukraine. The strikes resulted in civilian casualties and raised tensions in the region. It's a reminder of the ongoing conflict and the challenges of finding a resolution. Shifting gears once again, we dive into the world of sports at the University of Utah. The collapse of the Pac-12 conference was a significant event, leading to Utah's move to the Big 12. The gymnastics program also made headlines with the departure of its longtime head coach due to an investigation into his behavior. Despite these challenges, there were also successes, such as the ski team winning its 4th straight national championship. In a tragic incident, a former Afghan Air Force pilot and 2 other former Afghan pilots died in a plane crash in Oregon. The preliminary report suggests that the crash occurred after the pilot ignored his instructor's advice due to low visibility. It's a heartbreaking reminder of the risks and challenges faced by Afghan refugees as they rebuild their lives in new countries. In global politics, the U.S. has approved the sale of artillery shells to Israel without congressional review. This decision comes as Israel increases its offensive in Gaza, raising concerns about civilian casualties. It's a contentious move that has bypassed the usual checks and balances in the arms sales process. On the international stage, South Africa has accused Israel of genocide in the International Court of Justice and has called for a halt to the fighting in Gaza. This accusation adds to the ongoing tensions between the two nations and underscores the complexities of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Lastly, we celebrate the achievements of Julian Horton, the Aegis 2023 Football Player of the Year. Julian's fearless approach to the game, inspired by his father's background in combat sports, has brought him success on the field. It's a reminder that dedication, hard work, and a no-fear mentality can lead to extraordinary achievements. That's all for today's news roundup. I hope you enjoyed the stories and found my insights entertaining. Now, it's your turn to join the discussion. What are your thoughts on the colonial roots of poverty in the Philippines? How do you feel about the UK's improving affordability in property? And what are your views on the ongoing conflicts in Ukraine and Gaza? Share your thoughts and let's keep the conversation going. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.